Hola and bienvenidos. My name is Jorge Antonio Renault, and I am the National Criminal Justice Director here at LatinoJustice Puerto Rican Legal Defense and Education Fund, also known as PRLDEF. Before we get started with our topic for today, Operation Lonestar, I want to tell you a little bit about what this year means for our organization. 2022 marks 50 years since the founding of LatinoJustice PRLDEF. Today's webinar is the first of a series of events that we're hosting throughout this year to showcase the work we've been doing for 5 decades and the individuals working to uplift all of our Latinx communities. We want to highlight what we've done, what we are doing now, and talk a little bit about our hopes for the future. This webinar is one of 5 we're doing this year on topics we worked on over the past 5 decades, except for criminal justice, which has just been around for 3 years now, and which we believe are crucial to our continued commitment to serve the varied and complex Latinx communities in this country. Our other webinars are going to cover attacks on voting and what we are doing to fight back. That's going to be on May 22nd and will be led by Fulvia Vargas de Leon and Miranda Galindo. Our topic on July 8th is going to be imposter syndrome, which probably all of us have experienced. On October 15th, we'll look at the future of affirmative action. And in our final discussion on November 22nd, we'll cover the barriers to community members looking to move into green energy in a country that's still obsessed with oil, gas, and coal. We have a lot of other events planned for the year. Look out for our Legacy Tour, which will be taking place in person in a half dozen cities that Latino justice is connected to by history and by our work. We also have events highlighting our Latina trailblazers, the LJP alumni, support for the Latinx youth entering the field of law, and of course our annual gala, I'm never sure how to say that word, gala in New York in November. If you want to know more about these events and everything happening for LJP's 50th anniversary, please visit our website, LatinoJustice.org. Latino Justice PRLDEF was born in a historical moment that resonates with some of what we're going through today. When we were founded in 1972, we haven't been along that long. In 1972, our communities were over-policed and under-resourced and held back from their potential by discriminatory policies and practices that most of us are aware of. And like today, it was a moment when Black and brown youth created organized responses to ongoing injustice. Inspired by the NAACP Legal Defense and Education Fund, 3 young Puerto Rican attorneys, Jorge Bautista, Victor Marrero, and Cesar A. Perales, created PRLDEF with support from a Ford Foundation grant to use and challenge the law and the courts to defend the fundamental civil rights for the Puerto Rican community in New York. They won their first lawsuit, filed on behalf of the educational empowerment organization Aspira against the New York City Board of Education, which set a historic precedent for bilingual education as we know it today. As part of the organization's push to fight systemic discrimination that harms Latinx communities, our leaders moved to confront the disproportionate incarceration of our gente. They sought out and listened to formerly incarcerated individuals to support their efforts to transform our criminal legal system. The theory there was that those who've been incarcerated or have loved ones consigned to cages are the ones who can most effectively advocate for immediate and lasting change. And that is now a central core of our theory of change. Almost 3 years ago, our then President Juan Cartagena and our esteemed and dearly missed camarada Jerónimo Saldaña created Re-Envision Justicia. This initiative aimed to collaborate with organizations across the country led by Latinxes, serving the Latinx population directly, and most importantly, they had the goal of identifying and amplifying the voices of those who've been incarcerated, either through the criminal, legal, or immigration system. Since the other pillars that make up our work have all been around much longer than this one, I want to take a minute to introduce the philosophy that underlies our work. At Latino Justice, we understand the historical underpinnings of both the criminal, legal, and policing systems. The first was created to ensure that justice was indeed served to white property holding individuals. Nothing that has ensued in the century since has destroyed that foundation. We also understand that policing in this country has 2 entwined roots. Privately funded forces that protected and transported goods from the shipyards of Boston to their owners within that city, and the slave-catching patrols of the early 1700s in the Carolinas, which, as the NAACP puts it, have the capacity to pursue, apprehend, and return runaway slaves to their owners. Again, Police were formed to protect property, and little has changed. While we respect the millions of individuals who have sought to become law enforcement members and who have believed the mythology that says that they will do that to protect and defend their fellow Americans, the institution of policing is racist, defensive, antagonistic to individual and civil rights, and serves no purpose other than protecting itself against all attempts to divert the billions of dollars it demands to organizations better suited and devoted to community building efforts. We are on the side of those who demand the end of law enforcement as it exists today, from ICE to the Customs and Border Patrol to all state and local law enforcement agencies. In New York, LatinoJustice monitors efforts to downscale and introduce oversight of police, and that team is comprised of Andrew Case and Mina Oberdick. At LatinoJustice, we reject the categorization of our youth as members of violent criminal gangs, a categorization that rests on the way that our youth dress, on the music that they listen to, on the art adorning their bodies, on the color of their skin, and on their countries of origin. Law enforcement has attempted to marginalize and oppress entire neighborhoods and cities based on these racist categorizations, and we will continue to beat back these assumptions. Our efforts in that area are led by our Long Island office and counsel, Natalia Varela, and in Florida by Justice Advocate Coordinator Stephen Mangual, where he collaborates in many ways with the violence interrupters. We support organizations that believe substance abuse and addiction are public health issues and not criminal legal ones. Further, we work toward the decriminalization of all drugs because we're aware of the hundreds of thousands of Black and brown bodies sent to American cages during the drug war, which was specifically created to disrupt and destroy Black and brown communities. Furthermore, we see before us the economic and social devastation of almost every Latinx country in this hemisphere, and we watch as a catastrophic and unimaginable violence directly attributable to United States policy criminalizing drugs and that nourishes an underground artificial market. Concurrent to that support, we believe that prisons and jails in this country rest on the principle of punishment and degradation. They have no place in our society. We suffer from a lack of imagination, having fallen in love with the idea that dialing 911 for every imagined wrong results in justice, when actually it invariably brings about the wholesale dehumanization of individuals who are then arrested and caged when they should be living in a country that values their humanity and supports organizations devoted to healing their trauma. Communities thrive on relationships, and the police work to disrupt those relationships by profiling and targeting specific age and ethnic groups through intimidation and violence. And finally, we believe that Black lives matter. We center our work around the ideals articulated by our Black colleagues. We honor their sacrifices and respect their preeminence in this area. That said, I want to add two complementary points. First, for too long, Latinx legislators and policymakers at all levels have not just ceded leadership on criminal justice and, on criminal legal issues to their Black colleagues, but they have also refused to initiate, sponsor, and pursue legislative initiatives that would correct criminal legal wrongs, resulting in the disproportionate arrest and incarceration of our people. This must change. And we will fight legislation that further criminalize our existence, and we will work to remove Latinx legislators who ignore criminal legal issues. And second, for too long, many national organizations devoted to Latinx issues have focused on economic, immigration, and electoral issues, and they have ignored the centuries of colonization and the resulting criminalization of our gente. They have preferred to view their incarcerated sons and daughters as irresponsible and criminal, be shunned and stigmatized, instead of recognizing the dehumanization showered on them by systems designed to do exactly that. LatinoJustice will not follow that path. We are members of the community that demands a wholesale transformation of our criminal, legal, and immigration systems. We are full partners at that table, and we're here to stay. Now, I want to thank you for that, and we're going to go on to the Operation Lonestar portion of this, and excuse me while I have my cafecito, as Claudia has recommended. Okay, so we'd like to recommend, I'd like to introduce the panelists now. Claudia Munoz is the co-executive director at Grassroots Leadership here in Austin, Texas. And if there's anything else she would like to say about herself, I'll let her throw that in later. Miley is the Accountability Project Director at the Texas Fair Defense Project. And Carolina Canizales is our Senior Texas Campaign Strategist at the Immigrant Legal Resource Center. So thank y'all for being here this morning, for taking the time. And I know that we've talked this to death with our organizations, with other organizations. So hopefully this will be a little bit more of a roundtable, a little bit more casual. And it's okay if we step on each other, because that's the way we would be doing if we were face-to-face anyway. So Operation Lonestar. In March of 2020, I became aware that I heard through the rumor mill that they were closing a prison, right, the Briscoe unit, and that they were transferring people from all over the state, and that they were going to turn it over to hold people who were being arrested by DPS on the border. And all this was totally brand new. I mean, like, what in the hell is going on here? Why is DPS arresting immigrants and whatever? And it turns out it was the launching of Operation Lonestar, which was Governor Greg Abbott's way of maybe following 45 as a way of demonizing and using border issues as a way to climb the political ladder. So what he did is he took over duties that were specifically belonging to the federal government when it comes to policing and controlling immigration by asking DPS and later on 10,000 National Guard troops and DPS from 3 or 4 different states, right? State police from different states to militarize 35, 36, or 37 counties. The number shifts, right? And arrest people who cross the border, give them trespassing charges, and then send them to what turned out to be 2 state prisons that were turned over specifically for that purpose. So now I'd like to turn it over to the panelists. When did y'all realize that this was not just another craziness by Governor Abbott? Caro, maybe we can start with you.
That's a huge question. But thank you, everyone. So happy to be here with folks in Texas that are once again fighting one more crisis. I think I would like to center Operation Lonestar as another attack on human rights. I think we need to go beyond immigrants or migrants. Abbott clearly had an agenda last year in which all of the progressive movements lost. We lost rights, and most importantly, we're also on the verge of all being criminalized, right? Whether you're a migrant, whether you're a teacher teaching racism in this country, whether you're a trans youth trying to get access to the services that you deserve to have, or whether you're a woman also trying to get your reproductive health services. Like any of those folks, which is basically all of our population, right? Or if you're trying just to vote, you can get criminalized, you can get charges, you can get prosecuted. So I think, Operation Lonestar is part of a bigger agenda on an attack on human rights. And of course, because it's immigration and it's been such a wedging and divisive topic for the last how many ever years and decades in this country, it's definitely worked for Abbott to polarize even more, divide even more, and create this lie about crisis in our border communities, about danger in our border communities, and using this rhetoric just like Reagan did with the war on drugs, just like Clinton did, against our communities and welfare. This is one more example of extremist white supremacy, white nationalist rhetoric that is just going to demonize or further demonize Black and brown bodies and justifies action against Black and brown bodies. So I just wanted to give a little bit of that context, right? And of course, it's been, there's been so many reports and data and things about the operation and the failures and blah, blah, blah. And I think more and more people are seeing that this was just one more political move so that he can Governor Abbott could seek re-election, but of course doing so much harm as he does that, right? So it's definitely been, I think a lot of us are exhausted of the multiple attacks to continue to keep us on our edge and in crisis. But I do hope that as we move through this moment and as we learn how to push back, how to defeat it, it can become maybe like a kind of a blueprint or kind of like best things to do when this does begin expanding. Because as we know, states like Arizona and Florida are pursuing very closely what Abbott is experimenting with, here in our state. So I'll leave it there, but I want to pass it to Claudia and Mylia. I just want to give like a larger context as to why I think this is
Thank
happening.
you. Yeah. Thanks for that. Yeah, putting it in that context is great. Thanks.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I think if you've lived in Texas for at least 5 years, you know that Greg Abbott, like, unfortunately, does what he says he's going to do. So I think that, since SB4, right, that Show Me Your Papers, like SB 1070 clone passed in Texas in 2017, I have to take him serious because my family's lived in Texas as undocumented for like over 20 years. And I've lived here for a while too. I was just lucky enough to get papers last year, but like I have no choice but to take him serious, right? And seeing what he's done for many years, especially around criminal justice, right, and immigration. He's done a lot of different things for like a good number of years now. Like it's very clear that he knows exactly what systems are already bad and he can weaponize those against different populations, which is, I think, for me, the danger of Greg Abbott, right? That I think sometimes, like in Texas, we have to affirm each other a lot of like, no, what's happening is not normal. It's not okay. Because in some ways it's become so normalized, right? We're talking a lot about, for instance, the criminal justice system, where a lot of abuse and length of incarceration and like horrible representation, all of that's been normalized because, a lot of times we don't challenge these conversations that those things are not okay to happen to anybody, regardless if you've been accused of committing a crime or not. And so I think that for me, I've always took it serious. So since when I started hearing all the different things he was trying to do, it's been nothing but like game on. But when I actually like got to experience it in my own body and just kind of like feel it through, it's when in, I believe, June of last year, Jorge, a group of us, Amanda from Fair Defense Project, Katie Dyer from UT Law, Jorge and myself, we were like, let's go down there, right? Like we know that the border has been a militarized area for like a very long time. It's not like this is not new to border regions, but I think the way that it was being increased is what was like the scope and the resourcing and the overreach. And so I think when we went down there, and as you start going down south, we started seeing like troopers from like Florida, Iowa, Ohio, like sheriff's officers from like Galveston, which is like 6 hours from the border. And we started seeing all of these things. We're like, oh my God, like, what is this? Like, what is happening? And when we went to witness, magistration, we saw the processing center that had just been built. I think in that moment, it hit me like how real and how effective this was and how scary and how dangerous it was, not just for us in Texas, but for the whole country, because Abbott is not just doing this as, he's using this as a political point, but he's definitely like aiming for more power and more resources. And he's doing it exactly through law enforcement, right? Which if we're familiar with what happened on January 6th is like a tactic that people will use to take over, power. So I think that's when I was like, oh, this is real. This is scary. Everybody should know about this. He needs to be stopped. And it's a threat, not just to us here in Texas, but to the whole country.
Yeah, and I do think, I'm pretty much going to echo what Gato and Claudia said, but from a legal perspective, prior to returning to Texas, I was a public defender in the Bronx. And I think that at the core of why this whole operation has been so effective is that Greg Abbott has been able to exploit the criminal legal system and criminalize every behavior, right? Like you've seen it all summer with the special legislation. Like he's been able to criminalize teachers teaching the truth or just teaching facts. He's criminalized, right, youth wanting to just express who they are. And now he's criminalizing people for their mere presence in this country, and regardless of where they're from, right? Because we've heard and talked to people who are United States citizens. And I think that like what Gato touched upon is that it's not just criminalizing criminal behavior, whatever, right? Like we personally define that, but it's just criminalizing your mere existence. And that's, as a public defender, right, I hear talks all the time like, oh, like New York, it's so liberal. And it's like, we're actually not that far apart, the politics in New York and Texas. I think that that's how Greg Abbott has been able to exploit even the Democratic Party to jump on this bandwagon. And I think that, this has been a talking point for Greg Abbott. He's been able to warp all of everyone's worst fears and turn the most benign, innocent behaviors to any kind of criminalized act. And I think that that's what we really need to look at closely. And then the second thing that he's been really good at exploiting is the under-resourced and underfunded public defense system in Texas. And I'm of the camp that like public defense is a harm reductionist tactic to what is the larger issue of this entire carceral system here in the United States. But I think that the real issue is that it's designed to be underfunded, right? You see it with the way that the appointment process took months and months and months to set up, while in the meantime, you have Kinney County, which is the most racist, the smallest county in all of Operation Lonestar that's participating in this operation, has the most amount of people arrested and incarcerated right now. And I think that that's really, those are the things that are baked into this operation, has been baked into Texas and pretty much, every criminal legal system in the United States. And so I think that we also need to be talking about how it's not just an immigration issue. This is impacting all of us in different ways. And it's just using the criminal legal system as a vehicle to get there.
Thank you so much for that. I want to follow up on that and something Klaus said earlier about normalizing, right? That, most of my colleagues here at LatinoJustice are in New York, and I get emails from them, this latest atrocity in Texas, and they go, "Oh, Texas," and I'm like it's accepted, like, oh, that's just Texas, that's just the way they do stuff, right? Well, there's a reason we did this coming soon to a state near you, because no, it's not just Texas. There are other states that are doing this, and Greg, I mean, there are things that are being normalized here, right? Attacks like Karina said, across the spectrum of whoever we are, of everyone, right? That is just becoming normal and accepted. That's the way we do it from now on. And the thing is, in the fight against that, for a long time, and this is unfortunate, but I think it's kind of true, we've kind of fought in silos in some, right? Immigration over here, criminal legal stuff over here, some stuff like that. And I think this specific issue, however, had so many pieces in it that it brought a lot of different groups to the table. Have you seen connections, I want to start with you, between the criminal legal, or the organizations that advocate in the criminal legal sphere mostly, right? And those that advocate in the immigration sphere mostly. Have you seen connections and more of a willingness to recognize, okay, I need your knowledge, I need your help, I need your assistance in this? Have you seen more connections and a growth in those areas?
Yeah, I do. And actually, I think this is the moment where we hear, like, when you're in spaces in the immigration world, you hear of like crimmigration, right? And like, people often think like, oh, it's usually deportation defense and representing people in removal proceedings with criminal history. But I think now we're getting a fuller idea of like really we are working at, at least specific to Operation Lonestar, right? We are seeing a broader understanding of what defense looks like at the intersection of the criminal and immigration carceral systems. And I say carceral systems in a broad sense because, right, you have these intersecting issues like the family regulation system, where you have child protective services kidnapping children because the mother didn't take their child to school within 5 minutes. You see it within like criminalizing trans youth. But I think here in Operation Lonestar world in Texas right now, that we're seeing of attorneys and legal advocates coming together and trying to understand the expertise of the other. And I think that has been really beneficial to us doing really collaborative liberatory work. I think that we need to lean more into trying to understand each other's expertise. And I do see that happening. I think that is where we see the most effective advocacy. But I really think what it really boils down to is legal advocates and lawyers connecting and working alongside organizers on the ground who see this intersection every single day because they are directly impacted or by mere existence, right, are always in close proximity to these issues. And I think really legal advocates are most effective when working alongside folks on the ground, organizers, movement people. And so that collective liberatory work is necessary and has been working.
Caro, would you like to? I'd like to get y'all's input on that because I know we've had many conversations. Oh, before I go, following the topic, a shout out to Just Futures. Yes, thank you, Just Futures, and the people there who have been enmeshed in this fight. Okay, Caro.
Yes. Yeah, Jorge, I mean, I'm always complaining about not being connected enough or not being connected enough with all the other advocates or movements. But, it kind of had to be, right? Operation Lonestar kind of had to be, and it has to be our wake-up call for once and for all to lean on each other's strengths, expertise, and capacity, right? And I have seen, like Mai said, a lot more intention to be in a space where everyone can have a role or want to actually collaborate. I have seen also this with the civil rights groups that are helping us fight this back. So Human Rights Watch, Texas Civil Rights Project, right, the ACLU. And I'm just like, okay, this is new, and it's good that we are having these conversations as we fight OLS, Operation Lonestar back. And besides working with organizers, right, I also think Operation Lonestar, we're not going to shut it down unless we do the collaboration that we need to at the national, state, and local level, because it does have tentacles at every level of government. And I also think that we need to help those who are being, like Grassroots is doing, directly impacted, right? Being center in the fight, being part of that strategy, and hearing to them to see how do they think it should be changed, or not changed, but it should be ended. What angle should we approach that we haven't seen because we haven't experienced it, right? So I think it's a moment of opportunity. Operation Lonestar, as devastating as it is a moment of opportunity, and hopefully our wake-up call to finally come together, leave the organizational agendas behind, and just get to work. And yeah, so I'm excited for the moment. I have seen some change in the collaboration. I am proud to be part of it, along, my Claudia and many others. And yeah, I feel like I just keep thinking we won't be able to do it without each other. Yeah. So I really hope that as we continue to work together, we can make some either big disruption, or we can defund this thing, or whatever it takes, to bring it down. So,
Claudia, are you okay with taking that a little bit more into the more specific and maybe sharing with folks what Grassroots Leadership has done when it comes to bonding people out and some of the actions that we had to take to that, and to be specific with that?
Oh yeah, of course, yeah. So yeah, like Caro said, I just want to give a little bit of context of Grassroots and why we're taking the approach. For us, is very value oriented. Grassroots has done crimmigration work for many years, but I think that for us, we always hear about crimmigration being rooted in immigration, and then criminal justice tends to be an afterthought. But I think for us, any approach to these systems that includes the criminal legal system has to be rooted in the criminal legal system, right? Because the immigration system wouldn't be able to exist and thrive and model itself the way that it does without the criminal legal system that's based on racism and white supremacy, right? So I think I just want to make that very clear, that because for us, those closest to the problem are closest to the solution always, right? As an organization, we are both led and mostly staffed by people who are directly impacted. And so for the whole year that OLS has existed, we've been trying to just figure out like what exactly is ours for us to do. As Gato said, like there's many things, we need everyone, there's many things to do. We're fighting a whole like state that's very well resourced. So I think that for us, the most important thing that we saw was, well, we actually need to do like a model of participatory defense that we know how to do, and then get people out of the system so that those people can be their own voices in all of this, right? Like, so that we're not speaking for them, but we're like supporting them as they're fighting against this. And so we were able to partner with the National Bail Fund Network. Huge shout out. They're like amazing partners in all of this, but we were able to bond people out, bail people out. And then, we did that with a few individuals, and we found an amazing team of attorneys that was willing to challenge a lot of the horrible things that were happening. One of them, you saw a photo when we started, it's like parking lot magistrations, where they will just magistrate magistrate about 10 people at once. And during that hearing in the parking lot, they will force them to waive their right to a court-appointed attorney. And so when we started, we have a hotline at Grassroots, and we started receiving phone calls from families about Operation Lonestar. And so we actually started visiting people and just try to figure out how to help. We've done that for like many months, but this past 2 months, we focused on the Segovia unit, which is the second unit of the Texas Department of Criminal Justice that opened to collaborate with Lonestar. We got calls from maybe 60 families on our hotline, and they were all telling us the same thing, that their loved ones had been there for an average of 120 days. There were some people that were there for almost 6 months without ever talking to an attorney, without ever seeing a judge. And so this was about 60 families, and most of them have an average bail of $5,000, which is like the maximum amount for the misdemeanor charge. And so we were able to pull resources together, a team of attorneys, and went to visit people, just asking like, what do you want to do about your case? Most people that we visited were like, we want to pay the bail. Other folks had different situations, but we were able to pay bail for 11 individuals. They were then transferred, because this is the other part of Lonestar, that Lonestar wouldn't operate the way it does if it wasn't being in some ways like enabled by the federal government and by ICE still deporting people. And so we got those folks out. They were immediately transferred to CBP, to the Border Patrol. And then from there, it was like a whole other round of abuse against this individual. So far, we've been able to get, of those 11, unfortunately, 4 were deported right away. The 4 Mexican individuals were really treated really badly and denied a credible fear interview and deported right away. 7 were still able to do a credible fear interview. Of those 7, 1 person was released, and we just learned that 3 more are going to be released, and we still have a few more who are detained. And so we're fighting and trying our best to get people out, as many as we can, outside of the system, with the idea that these individuals do want to see Lonestar end. Like, a lot of them, travel as family units, and so they have every right to fight against Lonestar with us. And so that's a little bit of like what our focus has been. It has been really hard because, again, we're doing this with very few resources. We don't even have attorneys at Grassroots Leadership. So we've been partnering with people like Mai and Katie and many other people, and community organizations like Lupe, right, at the Valley, who showed up to an action at CBP. But like Caro says, it's going to take all of us, but I really do wholeheartedly believe that centering those most directly impacted and making sure that we are centering the dismantling of the criminal justice system, because, again, it is a weapon that's being used against different populations. It's going to be key to be able to do anything around this.
Yeah, thank you. One of the things that I think, let's be honest, like Claudia mentioned earlier, we have to take Abbot seriously. He's kind of been kicking our butt here for a few years in a lot of ways. The kind of evil genius behind it was the intermixing of the criminal evil, the immigration and all these systems and us not knowing how to react in certain ways, right? You get a place like the Texas Department of Criminal Justice, right? The Briscoe unit house, something like, I'm not sure, I want to say it's about 1,250 people or something like that. And of course, they were scattered throughout the state. So we were getting calls and we were communicating with the families of those individuals, like, what's going on? Where are our people? They're in Dalhart, they're in Dumas, they're in Lubbock, they're in Abilene. What's going on and why is this happening? And a Texas prison unit does not have the physical capacity to deal with ways that, say, a county jail is or something, right? Or a facility that's designed for people that are normally charged with trespassing, right? When an attorney can go in very quickly, see their client and get out, right? And move with the speed with which immigration issues normally require. Criminal justice issues, once you go to a prison, you may get an attorney visit once every few years or something. So they might have 2 of them there. They don't have the space to do that. And then there were all these other issues that were brought up about feeding, about visitation, about all this other stuff that, who are the guards going to be here? Are they trained to deal with individuals who have just had misdemeanors, who shouldn't be in a prison in the first place, right? Or are we going to deal with them under the Texas Commission for Jail Standards, which is the one that actually should be setting the standards for the facilities that deal with individuals who are being held temporarily, right, under Class B misdemeanors. And it brought up all these issues that the organization that Texas really weren't sure how to deal with in a collaborative sense, I think. And kudos to everyone who's been involved for doing that. Has there been more of a sense, and I'll just throw that to any of y'all, I know Texas organizations sometimes deal with Texas issues, local issues, like here in Austin, we deal with, no stand, no sit, no lie. We know with local issues. Has there been more of a sense of a national collaboration, of a willingness to deal with national groups and say, hey, this may be coming for y'all soon, and there are ways that y'all could assist in ways that maybe we hadn't seen before? And I'll just throw that out there to anybody.
I mean, I definitely want to hear from Caro because I know that's a lot of what she's been doing. But I will say that, like, we're trying our best. I mean, I think it's both balancing, like, respecting and knowing that every single community is dealing with something right now in the midst of a pandemic and so many other attacks against our people and just losing so many people. The uprisings for Black lives. I mean, everything that's happened, like, respecting that, but also, like, trying to ring the alarm of, like, this is a danger to everybody, like, he's carving a path that has like a very clear ending. And so I think it's been a little more than that. I think for us, we've been able to ask people like Just Futures Law, who are like most amazing movement lawyers ever, and Mi Gente, LatinoJustice, other folks that were like, hey, this will impact, like, if Abbot is able to like carve that path to power, like, just imagine what he's gonna do with all of us, right? If he makes it to a national position. So I think we've had to, and I think it's been showing us like how that should have been started like a very long time ago. But like I said, I think all of our communities have been going through it. But definitely want to pass it to Caro because I know that's a lot of what she's been trying to build.
Yeah. So I think of national implications in like 2 phases, right? Like, I think of copycat states that are going to want to do this, which will have national impacts. There'll be a lot more people, a lot more border states, right? And then I also think of what is the responsibility of the current administration? What is the responsibility of the Department of Justice? What is the responsibility of whoever, like the agencies like DHS, who are supposed to oversee ICE and CBP, who are completely collaborating on the ground. So for the first phase, which is how do we, I don't know if it's get ready, because it's definitely going to expand, or how do we prevent, those moments of expansion? To me, is Operation Lonestar is a choice. It's a choice from the local counties who signed to participate and got lured with millions of dollars to do it, to the prosecutors that decide to bring the charges to people when they can just dismiss them or like decline them, right? To the state representatives, right, your legislatures that decide to fund such shit. And I'm sorry for my language, but they decide to fund it, right? And they decide to fund it without even knowing whether it's going to work or not, right? Because the facade of Operation Lonestar is, we will increase border safety and security, but all they have done is just make it more unsafe, because people in border communities they were already militarized. Now they're literally a police state. Like, I think we should, like, if the images that should come to your mind, it's like, Palestinian being occupied by Israel. It's like literally police state everywhere you look. There's no way to feel safe. So we all knew Operation Lonestar is not to make the border security safe, but that this is what legislatures will tell you. This is what they're going to use to justify funding such operations with billions of dollars. They're going to use these arguments. So be ready, be ready to say, no, this is not about safety. You're only going to make people unsafe, and you're only going to expand our carceral system, right? Like, that's sort of how you can get ready for those kinds of fights. I also think locally, every single county, municipal, city government has a choice whether they want to join it and do the actions of the operation, or they're just going to peace out and not pay attention, right? And I think for those who organize locally, you already know who your leaders are. You can actually reject it before it even comes to you, right? You don't have to be lured. There are other ways to invest in your economy other than just more jails and more people in jail, right? So I think those are some of the things I would say to communities who may be facing this off in places like Arizona and Florida. And then in the second phase of just what is the responsibility of the current Biden administration, of the current Department of Justice, and the DHS as an agency who's supposed to oversee, right? So I think we've been driving this sort of demand, right, that these needs to be not just investigated, but it needs to be defunded at a federal level, because there is, believe it or not, money funneling from our federal government, Operation Stone Guard, all the way to Texas to support this. So how do we stop that funding, right? The other thing is, it's violated everything that we've ever known as rights, like due process, human rights, civil rights, constitutional rights, everything's being violated for the people who are being harmed. So of course, the Department of Justice needs to not only investigate, but find ways into which we can take this to trial, right? And I don't think they should be afraid of it. I mean, they're already at a fight with Texas, right? Like, this would be just one more thing to fight them on, right? They're already fighting them with voting rights. And I think it was the abortion bill, right, that they've sued. So this would just be one more fight. So we don't see why not take it on. We already are in the middle of a war, right? Like a legal war. So just take it on, right? So I think that's their responsibility, and hopefully we can push them to get there. And then I think DHS, oh my gosh. So DHS, they continue to say they have no role in Operation Lonestar. That is their public comment, what they've told media. In the article yesterday that ProPublica published, which was a really good article, right? Like, they're like, we don't have a role. We have a policy that we do not cooperate. However, we know they're lying, and we have proved that there is evidence that there is collaboration, specifically from Border Patrol with our state troopers. So to us, it's like, stop lying and actually have some type of policy that has accountability for CBP agents who are violating this non-cooperation stance that you say you have. And for the folks who are being impacted by Operation Lonestar, those who are being criminalized, DHS could do so much for them. They could actually decide to give them relief, right? They could give them parole. They could help them not be transferred to immigration at all, or not have deportation proceedings at all. They could do a lot more, but yet they refuse to. So I think there's layers, and there's three very clear targets level for us that we must keep pushing, so that if we win, right? If we get the DOJ to investigate, if we get DHS to not collaborate, if we get funding stopped, then our wins and our strategies could serve as a model for other states, so that they don't go through the same thing. So that they don't have all these things happening to them. So, I think those are some of the things that I think of when I think of national implication and expansions, and some things that people should be thinking about, at least in some of those states like Arizona and Florida.
Thank you. Look, we have about 10 minutes left, and I want to move into the realm of the personal and the professional. And I'll start with Mahi with this. Claudia, when we went down to the valley, there was a town hall / community meeting being held with a bunch of Panzones sheriffs, and my God, there was the sheriff, I want to say, of Valverde County, was like chairing it. It was a Latino Chicano, I don't know. He was sitting there and he had this huge black, he wasn't even a 10-gun hat, it was like a 15-gun hat. And all these guys were walking around in black uniforms, sheriff uniforms. And there was a sense of dismay to me. I mean, we get like around people like us who think like us. And to them, this is cool. This is okay, right? There are people in the Valley, the people all over the state who think it's okay what he's doing. We need to do it. The borders, it's Biden's fault. There's all this going on. It brought such a sense of malaise to me over the course of the next few months that I had to step back. It contributed quite a bit to some personal stuff I had that I had to step back. And I wasn't near as enmeshed as the organization represented here were, I think, day to day on the ground stuff. So if y'all don't mind, maybe a bit of, how difficult has it been professionally and maybe personally for y'all to say, my God, how do we fight this? How do we do this without judging? How are we doing? How are we moving forward in this in a way that's making substantive change without killing ourselves and destroying our organizations? Maya, you want to maybe take that? I'm not sure how long you've been in Texas, but I do know that you've been involved in this for a minute. So, yeah.
So I grew up in Texas. And I had
right. You told me.
So it's not new, right? I think for those of us, like Claudia said, that having lived in Texas for so many years, you kind of see the same pattern. But I think this one is the most disturbing because, everything that has been horrible and inhumane and just vile in the criminal legal system is now being applied across the board to everyone. And yeah, I think to answer your question, at Texas Fair Defense Project, right, we are a small but mighty team. And I think that with that, we aren't these large organizations with a lot of resources. And so in order for us to be effective, we collaborate. That is, the to able to, and I think that, and I want to be more specific. Specific. I'm ESL for life, so specific to when I say collaboration, I mean what Claudia touched upon is to collaborate with those who are impacted. And when I say impact, I mean literally risking their lives, like Claudia and Grassroots, people who are formerly incarcerated, on parole and probation, those who are still undocumented, going to the border and risking it all. I think that when I put on my suit, there's a lot of privilege that comes with that. I think that I'm taken more serious, even though I'm pretty short and tiny but tough. But I think that there still comes with privilege, though the perceived, credibility that I get from just saying that I'm a lawyer. And I think that using those types of privilege that at Texas Fair Defense Project has served us well, that lending our support and resources to movement folks, organizers, those who are incarcerated have been what has been effective for us. And I think that that's with an organization that's so little with fiscal resources, we try to use all the privileges that we can acknowledge to uplift and to build power and shift power to the people who can get the badass work done on the inside and outside. Now I'm kind of losing your question.
No, it was about personal and professional malaise. It's about, has this affected in a personal way?
Personally, it's rough. I think personally, I think all of us here can attest to the ways that both the criminal and immigration system has impacted us. And I think that it's hard to separate that. And I've leaned into not separating it. I've leaned into this is not just about me and my family. This is about all of our families, our neighbors, our community. And so what helped me sustain myself is going back to the abolitionist principles that I've learned over the years from Mariam Kaba and Angela Davis and Asada Shakur. And I think that really rooted in the work of feminism. Otherwise, I mean, I don't know how I would have gotten this far. I think commiserating with friends and family and talking about the ways that this is harmful to all of us has sustained me, especially Claudia. We're just out here like sending each other gifs. So
Yeah, I was gonna say that too, like just counting on each other. You know, there's many times that I've called my like last night at 1 a.m, like, hey, this thing happened, like what do I do? But it has been really hard. I mean, I've been organizing since I came to the US, since I was in high school, like as a junior in high school. You know, I come from like my mom, a union member in Mexico. Like I'm really familiar with movement organizing. This is the worst I've seen, and I think it's precisely because how effective it's been, how resourced, like how it's been done, and sort of the danger that I feel in my body, right? Like the ancestral knowledge that like something's really wrong and it could get a lot worse. And I think, Jorge, like, you know, I'll say, if I may, like when we went to the border back in June, I think you and I, as impacted people, right? I feel like we were so frustrated. We ended up having an argument that I think eventually we were like, man, we're taking this frustration out on each other. Like, I'm really sorry, but I think we were feeling it in our bodies, right? Like what we were seeing, sort of like the future that we knew in our bodies already that could just get worse. And I think it was really hard. Like you had to step away. I had to step away. Like when 2 months after I came back, like I got shingles and I'm only like 36. Like the doctor was like, girl, what are you doing in your daily life? And it was really hard. I had to take like a month off. And, you know, again, I do think that thanks to people like Miriam Cava that have given us language for this, right? So I'm going to like bring her back again, but just reminding us that abolition is about presence and not absence, right? So like Lone Star could and should be gone tomorrow, but then like what is all the damage there look like? And I think that's where we've been challenging ourselves a lot to like find, you know, what Mike calls the misfits, like find each other, find those who like feel it, who actually want to work, those impacted, and just go at it, right? And like move at the speed of trust and remember that we have to build presence and support for each other. So that's kind of what keeps me going. But I will say it's really hard. And it's definitely like the worst that I've seen. And I've seen a lot of really bad stuff.
Yeah. Caro?
Yes, I think I do ground myself in opportunity a lot because I'm really tired of operating out of rage. It's really exhausting to be angry all the time. So I'm like, to me, this is a new opportunity and a wake-up call to do better organizing, to do better advocacy that actually is, you know, centered in, like Maya and Claudia have said, in abolitionist principles, right? It's like, I'm not doing this work in Operation Lonestar to like modify it. I'm doing it to end it, right? Like I don't want them to have better conditions in the prisons and that be it. Like, no, like I want the prisons to no longer be repurposed for this and for all those folks that are suffering inside to be freed, including those who were there before, you know, like, because we do not have cages, period. So I feel like that's why I do the work. Like I'm approaching it from a principle standpoint, and it's what keeps me, I guess it's what keeps me, it gives me the reason to do it, right? I also don't want to be angry anymore because it can really wear us out, like it has in the past for me. So I'm just gonna like look at the opportunities here, continue to recenter myself and why I'm doing this work in the first place. And as an organization that's bigger, right, and that has resources, it's also how can I lend those resources? How could I do re-granting? How could I like pass all my DHS contacts to Claudia so that he can and they can do their advocacy without barriers, right? Or without us being in the way. So I think that's sort of also what gives me a way to be involved. And you know, I also support Kinney County folks who are being impacted, and along with Texas Civil Rights Project. And to me, it's like, wow, like these people are barely starting to understand that they have power and they have a voice and that they can actually say something. And it's like going back to basics. It's like teaching people how to be civically engaged. It's This is how you look up the agenda of your county government. This is how you request information from your sheriff's office. And like all of those going back to basics opportunities and giving support to folks on the ground is also very, very hopeful for me. So those are some of the things that keep me. But again, I have decided not to be operating out of rage anymore, because I think that's what was wearing me down really fast. So trying to keep a perspective on this work.
Yeah, thank you. To add a little flesh to some of the things Scotty was saying, we went to Del Rio last year, and Abbot had just, the one piece of this maybe that's been kicked out was he had tried to make it so that if anyone was transporting people who had crossed the border, and he said that appeared to have COVID symptoms or some weird codicil he had onto it, right, that they were subject to being stopped by law enforcement and had their vehicles impounded or something. And we went to Del Rio, and what was incredibly sad and despairing was you saw DPS cars everywhere you looked, everywhere. I mean, you went to the hotel and there was like hundreds of them from all these other states. And yet you would see women who had 2 or 3 kids with them on the streets, and they had their little suitcases on a roller, and they're rolling them down the street, and they're going from like store to store or from whatever, because they couldn't stop. Because if you stop for a certain length of time, you can get picked up. And we went to the Stripes, which served as a bus station. The Stripes is a gas station in parts of Texas. And there was, I don't know, maybe a couple of dozen individuals there who had crossed the border. And I think they were mostly from Haiti. And we were trying to get them places, to stay in a hotel, because the hotels were booked. And of course, we just dug in our own pockets. We all went in, got an ATM, got some money, got what we could. And we tried to transport these individuals to a couple of the hotels there. And then I remember that we got into some vociferous arguments with the hotel keepers who tried to have more money, to try to get more money. We're the only room around. So, it's like, yeah. And it's like, and this is what's happening day after day after day after day after day, right? We just saw a small, tiny piece of it, right? And yeah, it was, and I don't know if I should say this, but well, first, what's been scrolling across the bottom of the screen is in Lonestar. So we hope that if you're watching and listening or whatever, that you're able to go to that inlonestar.com. And I think you can also go to inlonestar.org if you just like org. I don't know. But these people, the people who put this website up were good enough to get both names, I think. Go there, sign petitions, do what you can to fight this, and let your people and the organizers and the people in your state know. And maybe go to the organizations that we've been here with, Grassroots Leadership and Fair Defense. And if you can support them, again, they're small organizations that are doing this. If you feel the urge or the need or in your heart to support, do so. Ourselves and ILRC can also use it, but I think they're a bit more on the front lines and a bit smaller. So yes, please, if you can support, please do what you can. I'm going to very quickly add a couple of shout outs to some other things that we're doing at LatinoJustice with other organizations. Raise your hand if you're sitting there and you were taught in school that the 13th Amendment ended slavery. Yes, okay. I think probably everybody has, but yes, we all know there was an exception. We know now. I don't know if I ever remembered that or if I ever thought of that. There's an exception. The 13th Amendment says if you've been duly convicted of a crime, which means that pretty well everyone in a prison, everyone in a jail has been convicted, and especially prisoners are basically slaves. And people say, well, Jorge, no, you're not slaves. Well, I don't know. I did 27 years and was told many times, you belong to us. Your property belongs to us. Had my property taken, confiscated whenever I wanted. And I had to work when they told me, where they told me, without days off, without whatever. And the state profited from that. People tend to think, oh, it's private corporations. No, it's the state of Texas that does that. And that's the same thing across the country. We would like to ask your support for In the Exception. It is a piece of legislation that was, it's called the Abolition Amendment. It was introduced last year by Senator Jeff Merkley of Oregon and Representative Nikema Williams of Georgia. And we've been collaborating with Abolish Slavery National Network and with something like 90 organizations across the country being led by Worth Rises out of New York that, again, we ask your assistance. We are trying to end slavery. In other words, ask yourself this question, no matter what you believe, that at what point should we accept slavery? And if you can say, well, at no point should we accept it, then we ask for your assistance in this. We ask you to go to intheexception.org.com and sign up to assist. Number 2, the state of Texas has decided it's going to murder Melissa Lucio on April 27th. If you're not familiar with Melissa Lucio, like Carolina said, it's difficult to continue to operate out of rage. But if you know anything about Texas, you know the history of what a professor once told me, los pinches rinches, the Texas Rangers, right? Their history of lynching Mexican Americans in the Southwest, their history of brutalizing our gente, and it seems like that's what they're doing to Melissa Lucio. And again, I'm not going to go off to the particulars of it, but we're going to ask you to go to the Innocence Project, as it's scrolling across the screen now, and to assist. They have scheduled her execution for April 27th. And what's weird is I read that Jeff Leach, who's a very hardcore conservative Republican here in Texas, the other day said that he thought there was damn sure enough evidence here to stop this execution and to look at the evidence. And if Jeff Leach can do it, my God, Abbot, what's next? We ask for your support in this. And now the last thing I want to talk about is twice in the last year, we put on convenings along with our partners in the Drug Policy Alliance, National Hispanic Caucus of State Legislators, and the incredible people at the UCLA Latino Policy and Politics Initiative. And the convenings were around, we had one, I think, last May, we had one in January, were about reimagining Latino justice, or, reimagining CJ and immigration to a Latinx lens. And I think almost everyone here at some point was on that panel, except Maya, I think, but was on different panels. And what we decided to do was just having the convenings wasn't enough, that we had to have a blueprint to move forward, right? So what we did is we went ahead and, again, the incredible people at UCLA took the ideas and the workshops that we had after and cobbled together at least a five-point issue, where it's not a 5-point plan, 5-point issues on ways that we can move forward. And we're having workshops and having further conversations about this. And we hope that you'll take part. So I think it's 12:06. So I think there are the questions there. Questions from those who are viewing. And I would like to ask them, and for whomever, how do we move from being in the defensive to being on the offensive? Isn't that what we'd all like to do? And I think Claudia just left on us. I don't know. Hopefully she'll come back. But anyway, y'all take it, right? How do we go in the attack, right? We've been reactive, just reactive. What can we do other than we should have shut down South by, right? But we would have been lynched here in the streets of Austin. But still, I mean, how can we go to being on the offensive here, y'all? And that's for anybody.
I mean, I think it's like everyday work, right? Like we're able to respond to this because we've been doing this for like a very long time. And I think, again, as I mentioned earlier, like abolition is about presence, not just absence. So I think it's like, in which ways can we be present for each other? In which ways can we continue to show up for each other, create safety for each other, like every day, in every interaction, before it escalates to something bigger and we're at the point that we need to like undo or like, get rid of something. So I think for me, that's kind of where I've been trying to go, of like every day you show up in different ways. Every day you create safety. Every day you go at it. And you do it from a place of like love and care. And not just like rage or, those things.
And I think to me, it's also seeking value, like alignment and values. I think Jorge, you and I have done a lot of work in Texas to bring people together with our abolitionist workshops and like key leaders, key stakeholders, because the reason why you are reactive a lot is because you're not on the same page, right, with other groups, right? And like, to me, it's like, if all of us held the same values, we would not have to react. We would just continue, like Claudia said, to do our work in the way that is deep, in the way that makes sense, that centers impacted people, that centers abolition. And we wouldn't have to react to like stupid Democrats making stupid decisions, So I think because they wouldn't be in those positions in the first place, in those positions of power in the first place, if we actually did our homework and did our work and aligned our values. So to me, it's like, you have to, instead of like planning the next campaign or whatever, right? To me, it's like, build relationships with your base, build relationships with your community, going deep, try to like align those values, have some bottom lines, right? Because when you do that work, then to me it's like any policy that comes your way, it's going to be an easy choice to either like accept or reject it. You know, any elected official that screws up, it's going to be an easy choice to take him out of power, right? Like, and I think, you know, I think to me is that, to me, offensive work is deep work versus just like, oh, let's find like a strategy that is offensive versus defensive. No, to me, it's like the deep work, the relationship building. That's going to make things easier for you in the future if you do that hard work first. So, yeah.
Play offense.
I think I tried not to start at the question of approaching it from like an offensive or defensive approach. I think that that's really binary. I don't think it's limited to like protecting yourself or attacking first. I think that as a lawyer, I think I hear that a lot, and I've seen it can be really ineffective. I think the question should be, where does the power lie and where should the power be? And I think, and like starting from a place of, let's dream of a free world. And what does that look like for us at the end of this? And how do we get there? What are the building blocks? Who are, like Claudia and I always say, like, who are the misfits that are willing to get the work done? Who can help us get there? Who can build the road? And I think that once we identify those folks, and I think that then we start shifting the power to them. And I think that that's where the power lies. I think that I tend to not approach it from like, these are the boundaries. I think it's more like, these are the legal barriers. Let's tear them down and let's move forward. And that way that served me well for many years. And I think, like once we, I think, you know, it's what abolitionists always say, like, kill the cop in your head, right? We're already all being policed. So I don't think we need to police ourselves by starting from that point of view.
It's a great comment. Thanks. Claudia said she might have to go, so tiene que ir a tirar el chingazo de Abbot más, you know, allá afuera, pero that's good. Say hi to the grassroots if you have to go, man. Thank you so much for being here and bringing your wisdom and all that's been going on. Muchas gracias. There's a question here about how do we bring in the youth maybe in places who haven't been there, right? In places like Washington State or Seattle or Oklahoma's pretty close, pero quién sabe, right? How are we bringing in? I went to a thing this weekend in San Antonio, and there was a great march by formerly incarcerated people who've been more formerly incarcerated, right? But I saw everybody knew each other, and it wasn't bringing anybody new, and there wasn't any youth. And it's like, how do we do that? What are ways perhaps we can bring in and hip them to what's going on there, other than just, hey, come on with me and go see this crap, right? But are there any specific ways I think people are asking to get them involved?
I mean, organizing one-on-one, right? Like,
yeah,
hold your first youth meeting, right? Like wherever you can, hold house meeting, cafecito at a house with some youth, go to your high schools, go to the after school stuff, recruit, talk to people. And I know that you said that Oregon and Washington are not there yet, but they are, right? Like when you look at how Border Patrol surveilled Black Lives Matter protest in those cities, like you could already see sort of this surveillance and criminal system like luring over your communities, right? Using every tool and tactic available at their disposal so they could like get those folks that protest into cages. Mm-hmm. So to me, it's like you already have these issues in your community. Like jails are not, you know, they're everywhere.
Not just in Texas, yeah.
Jails, policing agencies, you know, they're everywhere. So, and they're already impacting your youth, right? Specifically Black and Brown youth. So to me, it's like, make spaces for them to meet, give them the resources if they want to start a project, whether it's an art, whatever it is that they want to do to bring community together, be there as a resource, support them, bring in facilitator, whatever it is that they need, right? So I think it's always like, let them lead the strategy and you are there to support, you know, with resources or time or whatever it is so that they can have a space in which they can create the vision of the communities that they want to have and the campaigns or the steps that it's going to get them there. So I think to me is how you bring them. And I would say they already have these similar problems in those states, just because of some of the incidents we've seen, So yeah, I don't know if it's the full answer, but at least as some starting thoughts.
No, I think that what you're saying is on point. It's just basic organizing 101. And what are you doing? I think, but there has to be a willingness to also, on the part of people like myself and people who've been in the movement for a bit, we have a responsibility to seek not only fresh ideas, but fresh faces, and nourish them, and not be, as some of us tend to be, paternalistic or macho, or all of those things that come with being an older organizer who looks like me. It comes from my history, right? Even though there's been an incredible outreach done to me, LatinoJustice has been, not only do we have the core of our stuff about FIPs, about listening to the voices, but they've been good about putting their money where their mouth is and hiring at least 2 individuals right now in this division who are that. And I'm probably the only national director of the criminal justice division that is headed by a former incarcerated person. So but I come to this with my own set of baggage, with my own history, and have to be careful to know when to step aside and know when to shut up and to allow other voices in and encourage other voices in and say, hey, I'm stepping back, it's on y'all. And hopefully that will come about much sooner than later. It's organizing 101 is one thing, but Saul Alinsky was organizing for decades, and I don't know if he ever pushed the youth to the forefront. I know you said you might have to go. Do you want to leave us any comments in that area? Or one last question, I think it is, that I'm sorry, I'm trying to go through these questions that we use. How do we shut it down? I think that was kind of like offensive, right? But yeah, I don't know if we can. Mike, throw some wisdom our way real quick, man. See, Mo Cortez, how do we shut it down? Oh, that's Houston. Yeah. Taj in the house. Texas Advocate for Justice. Okay. Yeah.
Oh, man, that's a loaded question. I think,
right.
Everything. I think this whole last hour, maybe. Jury's still out on that. No, but I think, again, I think it's reframing the question, because this isn't the last we're going to see of Greg Abbott, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that this is, it's the same with Trump, right? When Trump was out of office, people are like, yay, this is over. And it's it's not over. This is the legacy of white supremacy in this country. So when we talk about how do we shut it down, it's constant, intentional work within movements. And I think that this isn't, we shut this down, right? There's going to be another.
Yeah,
there's always going to be an operation as long as white supremacy lives and thrives in this country. And I think shifting our way of thinking that, what if it never ends? What if, how are we going to, how are we going to create safety for our communities? What does that look like outside of a carceral system? That's how we shut it down, I think.
We're going to go ahead and wrap this up, I think. But I want to say one thing and reiterate something that's been said in various points in different words by everybody here. I spoke at UT last year. They asked me to go speak to some folks about abolition, and they're like, how do you do this every day? And the comment was about kill a cop in your head, right? And I think there was also a thing about, I asked the people there, how many of you have got out in your neighborhood actually and know who your neighbor is? How many of you can actually say that so-and-so across the street, 3 houses down, that's so-and-so, that's 4 houses down, and we've gone to them and we said, hey, if there's anything that we can help you with, if you have an issue, we're here for you, right? And we can talk all we want about getting rid of the cops, about getting rid of everything that we're doing. And we still live in our insular little world, looking at these little boxes and thinking that we're making a change if we're not getting out and talking to the people who are around us, who may not look like us, who may not think like us, and be willing to show them compassion and the support as they need it. Right? I mean, people think, there's a huge bullet that's going to shoot Operation Lonestar, and all that $1.8 billion that went to it in the special session is going to come back to our coffers. No. It begins with small, simple acts of social justice, of compassion and kindness every day. And it can actually change like that. So again, my Fair Defense Project, Texas Fair Defense Project, Carolina Canizales, Senior Texas Campaign Strategist with ILRC, we want to thank you all so much. I want to thank you for your efforts, for your day-to-day efforts. I want to thank you for the cool road trip to the Valley that we did last week, and that Carolina and I are going to Corpus in a couple of weeks. And we want to thank you so much for that. Okay. And it's
thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.